G'day. Welcome to this live session. It's Sunday night for me. I hope wherever you are and whatever time it is, you're doing okay. I thought this session I'd look at 10 things that we miss out on when we're on a self taught learning journey. And by a self taught learning journey, I mean, I'm not doing a course, whether it's a 10 video, 20 video course, or whether it's a course at a university or a college or some other institution. It's, the idea of a course is that I pay my money and I go and I do what I'm told to do. I engage in the way I'm told to engage with it. And look, courses can be amazing. They can have weaknesses too, but they can be really helpful. And as a trained teacher myself, I've got absolutely nothing against courses and formal learning. But I'm also aware from my own experience and personally, and from talking, that for many people, a course, whether it's even like a 20 video course on how to draw or a more formalized course, is just not possible at this point, whether it's money, whether it's available time, whatever. It's not going to happen. And so for all sorts of reasons, we engage on a what I call a self-taught learning journey, where whatever I do, I decide myself. And there are a lot of good things about that. However, there are some distinct disadvantages as well. And I thought it would be very helpful to focus on 10 disadvantages that I see that we have when we go on a self taught discovery journey of how to draw. And the important reason to overcome, to know them, is so that we can overcome them. We can overcome the impact of what these things do to us and to our drawing experience and our drawing outcomes, because some of these things can potentially have a huge impact on how fast and how well. G'day. I take it that being called a goat these days is actually a compliment. There are some things with this modern world I'm still getting used to, but g'day, duck. Yeah. If we're aware of the shortcomings of not doing a course, then we can take steps to reduce. Yeah, I did. I've discovered that. I Googled that actually about a year ago and discovered that, oh, it's actually good. Yeah, we can take measures to overcome the disadvantages. So if you have any questions about navigating your own path in drawing, then whether that's exactly what I'm talking about or not, then come through on the chat, or really any questions about learning to draw. This is a good night to do it. But we'll start with number one. The most obvious thing we do not get if we're on a self-taught learning journey is a teacher, because the teacher is at the heart of a course. Now, we may not have the one teacher throughout the whole course, or we may, but we have a teacher. And the teacher does all the things the teacher does. And as the student, I don't have to do any of them. So if I don't have a teacher, I have to do all of them. And that's okay. And it's possible. But it's harder to do if I don't know that I am the teacher as well as the student. And what was I going to say? So in a sense, the teacher does most of the things that we're going to talk about. So most of the other 10 points are things a teacher does, a good teacher does and will do. Oh, that's right. I want to make clear a big misunderstanding about this first area is that you might think, if you're, say, watching my channel, well, that's the easiest example, that I am your teacher. And I'm sorry, but I'm not. And it's not that I don't want to be. It's not that I don't think I could be good enough to be. It's not a question of that. But I can't angle what I do for you and for where you're at. I can't make sure that in a sense, if you want to call it, the course I'm doing is the right course for you. You have to make that assessment all the way through. You have to choose what videos you watch and how you use them and so forth, and whether you've worked out what those videos are about or not. So we have all of that. So no, if we're watching random YouTube videos, we're not doing a course by that person. And it'll become clearer when I start to go through the rest of these now as to the the reason why just choosing videos to watch, even if they're all from the one teacher, that person's still not our teacher. And the first thing we get when we do a course, besides the teacher, is we get a course level. So the material is going to be consistent in some fundamentally helpful way. Most obviously, is this a beginner course? Is it an intermediate course? Is it an advanced course? Is it a course that's angled towards a particular sort of drawing um, outcome at a particular level? So, so that's really important, because if I'm an absolute day one beginner, then I'm going to be needing input that's probably different to if I've been drawing around for 5 years and making some effort and some advancement. So we lose that advantage. Now, as a um, it's certainly possible to choose to do a course and to get a teacher and to get all the course benefits and discover that this is the wrong level. But it's easier to work that out if that's the case, because we've got the teacher to help us work out, no, this is not a good match for where you as a student are at the moment. So there's that. It's easier to both find an appropriate course and to have that confirmed as appropriate if it is a course, than if I'm just choosing little bits from here and there and everywhere. Um, so that's the second thing that we lose, a consistent course level and knowing that it's appropriate for what we're doing. The third thing we lose is a curriculum. Okay, the lessons that we're going to do. So lessons that will get us to where the course is saying it's going to get us, and it's going to, and all the components will be at the right level and fit together. And again, I've got I don't know, I must be getting close to 1,400 videos now, and they're not all at the same level. And a video that one person might find very helpful and very straightforward, they may not be able to make any sense of another video, because it's looking at things that, in terms of courses, would have many videos or lessons in between. And so sometimes in the excitement of what we see the lesson is about, we want to rush to that lesson and we watch that video and we try and do that work. And it ends up being confusing because we're not in that place. And it often means we're not in a place even to work out whether we've done it well or not. So we don't get the teacher. We don't get an appropriate course level necessarily, where everything in that course is at the one level that we can then work out is at an appropriate level. And we don't get a curriculum. And a curriculum also has the idea of the range of things that is helpfully required to tackle this subject, drawing, at this appropriate level. So we're introduced to all the things that we should be introduced to, that we can explore at a really basic level if we're a beginner, and so forth. The fourth thing we get when we do a course is we get things put together in a helpful order, in a sequential flow. So we're not doing skills that are going to be most helpful at the very start, even before we draw anything at all. No, we do get them at that point. We do get them in the right order, and or um, we don't start learning, say, about if we're drawing architecture. I think there's really no point learning how to hatch buildings before we can make some effort to draw buildings with some understanding of how perspective will affect it. That helps us to see or visualize in our imagination what we're trying to draw well. I mean, there's no point focusing on putting details onto structures that are fundamentally flawed in terms of proportions and angles. So there's a certain flow of where to put the effort at what stage, and having this flow of this sequential flow of what we do and the subjects we're doing and how we're doing it and the order in which we do things, so that we have, in a sense, the best chance of doing well in everything and getting the most impressive results that it's possible to get by each stage of the course. That's really important. And when I'm choosing things from random, then I'm getting all of this randomized. And even if you just choose, if you say only stick to my channel, well, even if you do my videos in the order in which I put them out, they're not following a sequential pattern in this way. So, um, and I've no idea what the last video of mine you watched or what level you're at. And these are all things that you need to be aware of and to make choices about the material that not just won't, let me just say, waste your time, because it's just not going to connect with you in a helpful way, but worse, may actually discourage you, because if you keep attempting things that are in the wrong order to really understand them, or they're too advanced or something such as that, it might be easy to think, oh, I can't do this, I just don't have it in me, whatever it is, I'm wasting my time. And that's not the problem. The problem is just that you've gone too high too fast and missed the mark, and in a way that virtually no one could have done and done well. So that's really important. Um, and then the fifth area, and this is the last one that kind of fits in these groups. So first thing we don't get is the teacher, and therefore all the things the teacher does. Um, and then we have things related to the content. We don't get the course level all being even, so it's at beginner, it's intermediate, or it's advanced. We don't get a curriculum that the range of things we are going to try and learn in this sequence of lessons is a good balance, and it's comprehensive for being able to produce certain outcomes at the end of the course. And we also don't necessarily get a good flow of sequence of getting things in the right order, which a good course should do. And then the other thing we don't get is resources consistent with all of this. So I might be, I might be having, there might be a good lesson on, say, perspective, but the things I'm required to do um, are not at that level. So resources basically means any material that you use in the course of the lesson. So a teacher's resources would be materials they use to study the material, if it's something that they're not necessarily on top of, or at least not all the time. And it would also be material that they may get the students to use in the lesson. So reference photos. Um, no, this is actually my drawing room. It's Sunday night here. It's almost 9 p.m. in Sydney on the east coast of Australia. So yeah, no, sometimes I am in the house. Yeah, believe it or not. Um, yeah, so resources that match everything else that I've talked about already. Good resources, consistent resources that flow in the right way, is something that the teacher is responsible for. So they all kind of go together. And now we move into some different things. Um, The first thing we get when we do a course is deadlines. Now, you might think, well, I'm glad not to have deadlines, but for most of us, let's be realistic. A deadline is a helpful thing. Knowing that something's due by a certain date, knowing that I have to have got something done by a certain date, knowing that I might even lose access to certain materials that I've paid for at a given date can be very motivating. So, so when I'm doing it myself and I'm trying to fit it around life, it's easy to kind of let life always or other life always come up in front of time to draw, or I can't find the right material, or I'm discouraged with what I did last time, and so I just let it slide for a bit when I don't really want to let it slide. But if I had to be geographically in a certain location every week and physically sit in a class, well, especially if I'd paid for it, I would be there and I'd be doing it, and I would learn to push through the kind of psychological juggling that we all have to do when we, well, probably learn anything, but certainly learn to draw. So, deadlines can be really helpful for pushing us on to overcome whatever barriers, as I said, psychological, time, um, whatever. And not having them can mean that I just drift off and I suddenly realize I haven't drawn for 3 months. Well, try learning the piano and not playing anything for months, or try learning to improve your fitness and not doing any exercise for a few months. Try learning a sport and not doing any practice, and see how that gets you. It's not a helpful way. So having external deadlines can be very helpful. And equally, it can be challenging if we don't. So learning ways to give ourselves deadlines somehow is very important. Sounds pretty reasonable. So I'm looking forward to this. Practical. Yep. Well, I always try and be practical because I don't know, life's too short to be theoretical unless you need the theory for the practice. I don't like them, but I agree. Yes, absolutely, Christus. All right. The next thing besides deadlines is marking. See, a teacher marks my work. And that's where I get everything I've done reduced to a grade, whether it's a mark out of 10 or whether it's a, B minus or whatever. It's where I get to see where what I've done, the level I've achieved at in this particular component, how it fits in the teacher's expectation of what is reasonable or poor or excellent for the sorts of people who should be doing this course. So if I'm advanced and I do a beginner's course, well, I'm probably going to get A plus in everything. And it's not that I'm amazing, it's just that the course is not a good match. And for the level that the teacher is expecting of everyone, I excel every time. And equally, if I'm a beginner and I do an advanced course out of some blunder or over enthusiasm, then I will get very poor marks, not because I'm not able to learn to draw well, but because I've unfortunately started in a place where I consistently will not have the ability to produce work that's in the range that for this course is the expected range, because I haven't met the prerequisites. So marks are helpful for telling us this. They're not bad things. They can be a bit nerve-wracking to wait for, but they're actually our friends. They guide us and give us direction, because they give us information that we can then use to make decisions with what we're doing. And if I'm on a self-taught drawing journey, not that I'm really doing this from that direction, but knowing if I'm doing well in whatever work a video may ask to do. So if you watch one of my demos and you have a go drawing it yourself afterwards, then if you had been able to get a mark from me or from someone, then that would give an idea of, is this too hard? Is this a good level for me? Have I understood the work? Have I understood what was said by what I've done? So yeah, marks are very helpful, and they relate to the next point, which is more generalized feedback. This is where the teacher, stands there next to you and says, "Yeah, look, yeah, sorry, you only got a 4 out of 10, but this is why. These are the areas that are weaker than they could have been." Um, and or this is why you got 9.5, because you really went to town on these values and the contrasts and the interest in the composition, and it all really works well, or you did really sensitive marks here to create a really effective um, impact of this subject. So all of those things happens with a teacher, or at least maybe may not be face to face, maybe a long comment, but this is what we don't get. Now, this is why it's so important that we learn to critique our drawings. Now, I do have quite a few videos on how to critique a drawing. Questions you can ask. They're very practical. Um, what things can I run through my mind when I have finished a drawing? And unfortunately, so often we just want to either forget about it, or because we haven't been happy with it, or look at it and thinking, oh wow, that's good, I'm so good. And no, every drawing is a place where we focus and we assess and we plan. And so we get that from critiquing what's worked well, what's not worked well. And it's really helpful if we can to get a second set of eyes, even if it's someone who doesn't draw, someone who has no drawing experience, but someone who we can trust to be honest and say, okay, what do you think? You might even say, this was my photo that I was drawing from, and I was trying to do this. How do you think it works? And particularly to be able to say to someone, you don't have to see what's wrong with it, but if something doesn't feel right, tell me. Because once they say this looks a bit awkward, I may be able to, as the one who drew it, I may be able to work out why it's not looking so right. I may be able to look at my perspective a second time and think, okay, well, they're saying it doesn't look right. So, and so forth. And so a second set of eyes is really helpful. We can get that second set of eyes ourselves a number of ways. And one of them is simply to look at what we're drawing through our camera, and see it shrunk down to very small on the screen. And I mean, I can't help but do that most of the time because I'm recording when I'm doing most of my drawings, and I'll stand up to stretch or something, and I'll look down and I'll see, reduced down to this, and it lets you see everything all at once in like the one look. And that can make any things that aren't quite right really stand out. Or if there are areas, too many dark areas, that will stand out more, and so forth, or not enough, if there's too many mid values. So all of these things we can get when we sort of shrink it down. A similar thing by holding something up into the mirror and flipping it around. Suddenly it's not looking the same, and that lets us see it freshly without having been, because when we draw it and we create it maybe over an hour or 2 hours, if things aren't quite right, we get used to seeing them where they are. And so it actually becomes harder for us to work out this isn't quite right. The other, what I used to think of as the magic time, this was particularly when I was painting, would be the first time I would see the painting I was working on the day before, because I did oil painting, so they could take days and days. The first time I'd see it in the morning, having stood in front of it sometimes for almost the whole day the day before, to have left the studio, to have gone to bed, to have whatever, got up, fresh morning, fresh shower, everything. I would make sure I was ready for the first look so that I could take in the impact separated from the last look at the end of a whole day of looking. And I often got to see things like, yeah, no, the colors still aren't bright enough, or the value contrast still aren't strong enough, or no, this flower is just lopsided and it's not working or whatever. Um, and sometimes it would be something that the day before I was quite happy with, but when I see it with those fresh morning eyes, you know, really just focused on how does it look, I could see it as if I were another person or as if I was looking at someone else's work and get that ability to therefore critique it in a more helpful way. So, yep. Feedback. Yeah. So if you've just come in, if we don't do a course, we lose the teacher and we lose all the things the teachers does. We lose a course that where everything is at the same level. So whatever component we're looking at, it's going to all be at beginner level, or it's all going to be at intermediate or at advanced level, and that sets us up if we're doing the right level to learn more effectively. There will be a curriculum. The range of things that we do will be defined, and whether it's a very detailed course, as on perspective, where there'll be all the things on perspective that we need to know to some degree for that level will be there, or maybe it's a general drawing course, so everything's beginner level, and it will get the fundamentals of perspective at least, even if every possible situation isn't clarified there. We get, if we're doing a course, a helpful flow of sequence. The order in which we do the things is designed to build most effectively on what's come before, because a very common learning structural tool is that when you learn something, you then use it in the next lesson where you're learning something else, and then in the next lesson when you're learning something else, you still do you need what you did in the last lesson and the lesson before, and then in the fourth lesson you're still having to pull on the three subjects that you covered in the first three lessons and so forth, so that you're always consolidating things that have already been done. Yeah. And then the fifth thing was resources that are the things that, so if and a resource is something the teacher uses for the course in some way. It may be for their own equipping for classroom time, or it may be exercises for the students to do, reference photos to use, and so forth. Artists' work to inspire them or to give direction for technique or whatever. They're all resources. If you're watching one of my videos, then you're using it as a resource. But if we're self-taught, we have to choose the resources we watch. And the challenge is that we choose ones that fit together well with each other. It's very possible when we're beginning to draw to kind of think that there's one way to learn to draw. And therefore, even with beginner level videos or videos that are declared to be beginner level, there are different ways of thinking about it, and therefore ways of actually doing it. So, and of therefore presenting it. And what one person's thinking and saying and progressing may not fit in with what someone else is saying. So there are things that I don't recommend that people do. And some other teachers would not perhaps see a problem with it. Whereas I don't think it's going to be helpful, certainly not for drawing the way I draw. But if you're not aware of this, you may end up listening to this video from this person, this video from that person, this video from that person, and they might each be a really good way of understanding and learning to draw, but they don't go together. And so that can be confusing when you don't understand that dynamic's happening. The eighth one is okay. And so then we had the next one, deadlines, structured times to do things or to have things done by. That can be very helpful as well as very stressful. Marking, where we get to know whether what we've done is okay or not, whether we've succeeded in what we've tried to do at the appropriate level we're at. Feedback, we get feedback from a teacher, which is really explaining their impression of where we're at, what we've done, what it tells us, what it indicates. And the ninth one is what we get with a course and a teacher is the ability to for us to ask questions, to ask very specific questions. And these may be things where there was a gap or a confusion in the teaching material, or it may be things that have just come to us that it would be a good time in terms of where this sits in our learning to draw because you know yeah, and we can ask the teacher. We say, but what about this and what about this? Or I've seen I've had the perspective lesson, but like, yes, but what happens if the street goes around a corner? Like all the examples you've shown us, all the houses sit at right angles or parallel to each other. What happens when they're not at, it doesn't say. And we get to ask, like, does that make a difference or not? If there's a video that I'm watching on perspective and it doesn't address that, there's no one to ask. Now, I have a whole video on that because it is in fact different. What if the street goes up and down? How do you do that? Well, it's different. I have a whole video on that. What if the street goes around the corner and up and down? Yeah, well, I have a video on that too. Why is drawing uphill streets and the buildings on such a problem? Well, I have a video on that too. But when we watch a simple like introduction to perspective video, it doesn't usually doesn't deal with those, and it doesn't even tell us that it's not dealing with them. And there's only so much we can juggle at one time and not get overload. But if when I'm doing my very introductory stuff to perspective, if I can see that what we've just learned, I can't see how that would apply to around a bendy street. Well, it's really helpful if I can ask the teacher at that point, because the very fact that I've been able to frame and understand the question in my mind and want to ask it shows that I'm ready in some way and would benefit in some way from having the answer to that. So uh, even if it's not the time for the teacher to actually explain how it works, but to say, you're right, well spotted, it doesn't work the same way, it's different, and maybe they'll just show us quickly, but say, look, but we're not worried about that just yet, but yeah, you'll get to that. Or they might give us something, a resource, maybe a YouTube video we can watch if we ourselves just want to do that separate to the class. So that's the ninth thing that we get. We get the chance to ask random questions that may directly or indirectly or just be quite separate to the course, but we really, we feel like it's just going to be very helpful for us to be able to ask that at this point. Yeah. And what's number 10? Well, the 10th thing we don't get when we are self-taught are classmates. We don't get a cohort of other people who are going through the same thing at the same time. Now, maybe literally at the same time if we have a physical classroom, which seems to happen less and less and less. And I got to say, I think that's a real loss with art, because there is something quite, I don't know, at the very least encouraging being in a room full of people and we've all got a sheet of paper, we've all got the same thing usually to have to do. We're all struggling to find the marks to create it with whatever materials we're using. And I do what looks right and feels right for me. But then I get to go and stand and see what someone else has done and someone else has done and someone else has done. And, we can all laugh or cry together, or some of us can laugh and some of us can cry. And I don't know, it somehow helps to kind of let the whole thing just feel a more natural, less stressful time. I mean, once you get over the whole ego thing of, oh, I don't want anyone to see me make a mistake. But what you learn very quickly is that everyone makes mistakes. Even the good people make mistakes and have issues and struggle. And in the end, it doesn't matter. It's where we're at in the whole thing. But it is also at times good to be able to kind of just compare notes with someone who's in a similar part of the journey to you with all of this. And I know there are like Discord groups, and I do have a community part of my channel, which I haven't been able to engage with very well because I've really only just learned how to access it to make comments. And but that is certainly a place where people who watch my videos, if you wanted to, and if you watch one of my demo drawings and you drew it yourself, well, you could post it onto my post page, and no, I think it is actually called my community page still. And then other people could do the same one, could post, and you could comment on each other's drawings. And in a sense, whether I comment or not, because I can't commit to critique every drawing of one of my videos because there's a lot of them. But yeah, you could show your work to each other, and in a sense do a bit of, and even if you can't actually talk with each other, you can still see each other's drawings and you can compare that with yours. And yeah, and for some people that could be just a nice feeling to feel that they're connecting with people who are trying to do the same thing and actually see what they've done. And yeah, and hopefully post theirs as well. So can I suggest you do that, if you, particularly if you tend to watch my channel consistently and you tend to do some of the demos. And I wouldn't even expect anyone to try and do even most of them, because there's quite a lot of them, and they're not all at the same level, and they're not all the same sort of subjects. But if you particularly like the tree ones or the scenery ones, and you tend to do those, or you tend to do the more architectural ones, or you tend to do the ones that are just basically simple objects that might only take 15 minutes, whichever ones you tend to do, post those onto my post page, so that you can see what you each do. And particularly if you do it fairly soon after a particular one comes out, there may be more of that one drawing subject being drawn and posted. I would love to see my channel work that way, even if I couldn't actually engage with everyone particularly much, because I think the loss of classmates and doing it on your own is a real loss. I think most learning is best done in connection. I think most things are actually best done in connection with other people. And so again, if we're aware of that, when the learning experience becomes intense and discouraging, that's when we need some other voices besides the ones saying, "Oh, you're crazy, give up, why are you doing this, you're hopeless, you got no chance, you've wasted your time, oh, you ruined it with this or that, what made you think you'd do this?" Yeah, sometimes someone standing next to us who's going through the same thing saying, "Oh yeah, but I felt like that a week ago or a month ago, and I'm really glad I kept pushing through, or I just tried to go too hard too quickly," which is a big thing. When a course puts the brakes on what we're doing, it stops us getting unhelpfully enthusiastic. I mean, enthusiasm is great, but if I'm a beginner and I do a few beginner things and I'm surprised at how good they are, that's just a sign that I've got good material for beginners. And it doesn't mean I should, 3 drawings later, progress to intermediate or advanced level. I'm just setting myself up to fail then. So, and if I was doing a course that would discipline me to stay at this right level and learn all the things at that level I need to learn before I then go on to something that's more advanced, will be more demanding in ways that I probably can't even appreciate at the advanced level. So all of that is kind of happening, is operating. So, there are 10 things that a teacher would do, well, a course would do, a formal course that I'm paying money for, would do, whether it's online videos, they should be at a consistent level. They should have a set curriculum so that you know what you're going to learn. They should have a good sequence of what information's presented in what way. The resources should be helpful to maximize engagement with those subjects, those issues. We should have deadlines to sort of force us to be consistent in the commitment we have to them. We should be able to get marks to know is what we've done at an appropriate level, and then more complete feedback as well. We should get the chance to ask questions, and hopefully we get classmates. I was going to say playmates. We get classmates. Yeah. Anyone listening now? What's your experience of either, if you have either, of either doing a formal course um, or of navigating this yourself? What's your experience with that? Or if you have any questions about drawing at this point, I'm happy to answer them. I was planning to sit here for an hour, so I can certainly go to bed earlier, but I've got 20 minutes if anyone would just like to ask any questions about drawing. Yeah, or about my drawing. Never studied drawing formally. Yep, I never really have either, so that's not necessarily a problem. But the advantage I have is that I am a trained high school teacher, even though it was a very long time ago. My training was all in the 70s, and I only actually taught for a few years for and then I had some voice issues, and so I couldn't keep doing it. But what it did was I learned, as part of the training for that, I learned how we learn. And it took me a little while to realize, when I started learning to, well, paint and draw, how much that benefited me. That simply learning how we learn let me then apply that to art. And that I wasn't being perhaps as more random with things as someone who hadn't had the opportunity to have that training of understanding how we learn. Yep. Christus, just learn from YouTube. And have you found that helpful? Like, have you found it easy to find things that are at the right level for where you're at in the moment, and that actually help you feel like I've learned what I need to learn to be able to draw the way I want to draw? Has that been straightforward? The hardest part is to get feedback and take ages to self-assess and critique homework. Yeah, I don't know, Artjoy, whether you've I would have at least, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 videos on how to critique your own drawing. Questions you can ask, and methods to sometimes ways to involve other people as well. So if you haven't seen any of those, I really would recommend that. But as I said before, even just asking a friend, does this look right to you? Even if the friend doesn't know what's wrong with it, they often can see, yeah, this doesn't, especially with perspective and buildings, just doesn't feel quite real. I'm not sure why, but well, that's still helpful to know. Hit and miss, yep. Nishith, because of informal learning, this is the best place and best way for me to learn. How do I get as good as you do drawing without daily practice? Well, I don't have daily practice, but I do draw a lot. But simply drawing all the time doesn't mean we improve, because I can draw the same way every day, and whatever weaknesses or problems or mistakes I have with my drawing, I can just repeat them over and over and over and over again. It's only when we can see the weaknesses that we can work on those. So that is the challenge. It's not so much drawing, but it's focused, intentional, directed drawing, which is why the critiquing is so important. I mean, I do critiquing, but it is, I do charge for that. Like, I'm happy to do one-off critiquing, but this video isn't an ad for that. But yeah, it is important, but don't underestimate your own ability to see weaknesses as you learn. Or if you know someone else who draws or does art, maybe they paint, but they're going to be thinking in the right way for you to say, look, I don't want you to tell me it's good. I want you to tell me how I can improve it. have some good, honest friends who be wanting to help you improve, and put that to them. I don't know that those people would be that hard to find. Um, and and certainly every time I do a drawing, I'm looking at it thinking, look, here's a good question to ask for critiquing. If I were to draw this again now, immediately after I've just drawn it, what would I do differently or try to do differently? And so, you know, I might, this is a drawing that wasn't that long ago. I might look at it and I might think, well, I kind of wish that this bit here was just a little bit lighter, particularly over here, just to make it a little more separate to what's down here. Now, I think there is and I was trying to create a slight sort of stronger emphasis in these closer bushes down here to these trees that are more in the small trees in the background. But I wished I'd gone a bit lighter, especially where it is so close to this. So, I wouldn't die in a ditch. I'm happy enough with how it looks. But if I were doing it again, that's what I would do. Now that means when I go to my next drawing, I'm thinking, gosh, now I must remember to go a bit lighter, because I can, of course, go darker if I want. I can go over and go heavier, but I can't take it off drawing directly in ink as I do. That's always a living on the edge excitement. My have tried online course, but was not really happy with this particular course yet. And I guess that also you can only find out so much without paying for it and doing it. I don't know whether the course you did had reviews that you could have read, but something may be a good match for one person, but not a good match for you. So yeah, I hope it wasn't too expensive, the course. My style of drawing and teaching has opened up a new dimension of drawing. Thank you. It has for me too, actually, because it has been an evolving journey for myself. Actually, look, the one thing I will say, and I say this in quite a lot of videos at the moment, because I'm just so aware of how true this is and how important this is for me. And that's that learning to understand a framework, a conceptual framework, an understanding of what is drawing for me when I draw, because there's more than one way of understanding it, has really helped to guide me in developing my style, that the actual ink on paper techniques that I use to create certain effects. As I've come to firm up this idea that when I draw, I'm looking at reality as captured by a camera, and I'm translating it into what I hope also looks like reality, has a sense of realism, but it's speaking a language that comes from ink marks on paper. If you like, the ink on the paper is the words. And I can't say everything a camera can say, but I can also say things a camera can't say. And that's why it's a translation. It's not a one for one. I'm not taking this and copying it exactly onto that. I'm having to change it to accommodate that it's a different language. The more I thought that through, the more it directed me in exploring mark making to create effects. I'm not copying a shape or an outline. I'm trying to draw something that looks like something in some way. There's a link between my marks and the effect that all those marks together have, and what's in the photo, or what's in real life in front of me, or what's in my imagination that I'm imagining as real. And I found that the more I had, the better this framework of understanding the process was, the easier it was to actually do it well. And or at least well, no, I'll say do it well. I think I've done it well. But to keep refining and keep improving, because the one thing I've never been afraid to do is to look at my work and think, as I said, yeah, this could have been just a little bit lighter, a little bit less heaviness with the ink, and I feel like it would have just sat a little better back. And the other thing, if I were doing this again, I drew. I think I only used 2 pens. I used maybe a 0.3 for down here, and everything else is in a 0.2. And I think I might have, for the building, I could have used a 0.1 and just gone a little bit lighter. And so again, if I were drawing this again, like straight away again, or the next day, I would try it with those changes, and I would then get to see, is what I'm thinking okay? But even if I don't draw this particular scene again, the next time I draw another scene like it, and because of the amount of drawing I do for the channel, if no other reason, that shouldn't be too far away, I will be more focused on that, particularly when there's a lot of foliage that's kind of laid back, because it can be a little harder to separate the depths of plane when those depths of plane are totally foliage. So yeah. So, but I'm, I could just sit there and go, oh, that's great. I don't do that. But if there are parts that work really well, like they really are effective translations of the scene, then I think, wow, that's worked really well. That's really captured the sense of the gap between the two objects, or it's really captured the feel of the foliage of this particular tree, or I might be thinking that worked really well for the pavers, the kind of fan-shaped pavers, like, or I might think, oh, I should have had a few more marks there, or I might think some of those marks could have been smaller, or I might think, no, that's what I was after. And so next time I'll try and do something similar. All of these things is the critiquing, and particularly when a drawing hasn't worked out, and if we feel a bit fragile, we may just want to throw it in the bin and not look at it again. And they're the drawings that where we can actually find the most stuff to help us with. And so we need to have some courage. Maybe we don't do it at that point. Maybe we let the tears dry, and the next day we get everything. Okay, well, why isn't this working? Because nothing shows me as clearly what's going to work better than what I've just done that hasn't worked, because I know that I need to change this in some way. And most of the time, you'll find we'll be able to actually look at it and work out what might that change look like. Or it gives me something to research. Maybe I don't know enough at that point. If you really don't like the way your tree canopies look, if you think they always end up looking cartoon-like, then okay, stop drawing trees. Stop drawing tree after tree after tree that has the same problem, and start to look at drawings of trees that other people do in a style that you think lines up with where you'd like your drawing style to go, and get the magnifying glass and look to see what ink is on the paper, what pens has it come from, how is it arranged and layered, and how does it relate to other marks around it to create the feeling of a tree that feels more realistic. That's what you need to do. Now, if you were in a course and you had a problem, then that would be the sort of thing that the teacher might do for you, might bring in some drawings of other artists of trees to give you some ideas, not to copy their trees, but to understand their process and their mark making and the effects you can create from that, so you can incorporate all those things into what you're doing. But you'll have to do it yourself, because if you're on a self-taught drawing journey, you are your own teacher. And so you get to do all the teacher jobs as well. But then you can pay yourself. So, there's one advantage there. Let's have a look. Actually, true. When I take week breaks and go back, and I'm better than when grinding. Yeah, you can take too long a break, but sometimes we just need to recharge, and we need to recharge our spirit as well as our energy levels. And yeah, sometimes if I'm struggling with a drawing for some reason, I'll just leave it and go and do some gardening, and then come back to it. And just that break, that disconnection, for a moment and doing something totally different, having the sun on you and the dirt in your fingernails. Um, yeah, it can be very recharging as well. How can one find a course that fits? Look, you know, reviews. But I think firstly, know what you're after. Like, don't go looking for a car, not knowing if you want a two-door or a four-door or a one-person car or a family car, or you want an off-road four-wheel drive car. Like, you know what sort of car you want before you go shopping. So before you go shopping for a course, because that's what you're doing, before you go shopping for a course, have as much of an idea of what you want to get, what value you want to get, and what sort of model course you want. So have a sense, am I dirt beginner? Do I have a bit of experience? Do I think I'm reasonable? Or do I feel like I'm advanced, but I want to get better? Now, I'm not saying that you'll necessarily even have the skill to know. You might think you're advanced, and in fact, you're intermediate. Um, But it's a starting point, and a starting point is always a better place, a starting point that's been informed in some way than just totally guessing. So, um, and then, if it's a course that you're paying for, then you should be able to get an overview of the course. There should be reviews from other students. You should be able to see whoever's designed the course, their work, and have a sense of, because their work is going to reflect the course. And therefore, if you don't want to be drawing the way they draw in some way, then it's probably not a great match for you, because that's where it's going to be taking you. So, it may be a great style for them, but it's just not for you. So, maybe it's too realistic for you, or maybe it's too stylized for you, whatever. Yeah, so having a strong sense of where you're at and what you would like, and also the subjects that you enjoy drawing, so it may be a great course with great skills, but if the person who made the course loves kittens, and every drawing that you learn on is a kitten, well, that's great if you love kittens. But if you really prefer drawing grand European palaces and opera houses and things, maybe you'd rather find a course that explores learning to draw with those subjects. Or you love portraiture and you want to learn portraiture, then find a course that doesn't just teach portraiture, but it teaches drawing with portraiture as the subject that it uses. If that makes sense. Um, Christus, I wasn't aware you could do this kind of drawing with fine liners till I found your channel. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know if you know, but I started drawing in ink fine liners, so that I couldn't erase, because the better I got at drawing, the worse my perfectionism became. And doing a pencil under drawing, I kept needing it to be more and more perfect. And I felt I was erasing more than I was leaving on the paper. And as I've said a few times lately, it felt like some drawings spent more times in reverse gear than forwards direction. And it was just the stress, the tension. It was taking all the pleasure out of drawing. And I thought, well, if I draw directly in ink, then, well, I can only go forward. And what I learnt was, even if every mark isn't quite the way you envisaged it before you put on the paper, by the time you get to the end of the drawing, it's all the marks together, not any one mark. And in most cases, even a line that seems, or some marks that are wildly out of place when you put them, you can blend them in and make them, just incorporate them in a way that you don't notice that there's any problem at the end. Um, and that's a great skill to learn as well. That's a far better skill to learn than learning how to erase a line and then redraw it and then erase it again. So yeah, yeah. Right, I'm ditching the pencil for a couple of weeks. Yeah, and listen, you do have to give it a good go, but I would suggest, yeah, that when you first sort of go cold turkey, don't don't try and do too much at once. Like yeah, and again in my style, because I've kind of developed this way of drawing where I go a lot slower at the start because you need to establish the proportions and the scale and the distances between things. And so, because every mark will be there at the end, you have to be cautious with the initial marks. You can't just rough it all out and then, at the end, erase all the bits that weren't in the right place. And I put lots of dots on the paper that let me check angles and distances before I commit. They let me visualize the drawing on that sheet of paper in relation to what I've already drawn. The more you draw, the faster the tempo becomes because you have more things to reference off on your drawing and off on the photo, but then on your actual drawing. Please hit that like button for me if this has been helpful and you haven't already. Visual distortion, I had to give up a pencil too. I could erase all day if given the opportunity. Perfection is horrible and trusting the process becomes, yeah. And I, yeah, yeah. So I'm presuming from what you said that it's certainly been helpful for you. That it's kind of let you step out of that perfectionism. I used to think of it as the eraser is the air that perfectionism breathes. It's the thing that keeps perfectionism alive, that maintains it when we draw, because it's the thing that lets us endlessly remove something because it wasn't good enough, rather than making the most of it, which is what we do when we put it directly in ink on the paper. We get to sort of build it all together. Yeah, yeah, you know. Well, I'm glad it worked for two of us at least. Yeah, it can feel really hard and it can seem almost impossible. And look, maybe you draw in pencil because you love pencil, and like most of us, I started drawing with pencil um, before I began to draw with ink, but was using the pencil under drawing for the ink. I just drew with pencil. But just because I draw with pencil, I can still have the no erasing rule. So I haven't probably really drawn with pencil for maybe a year, but the last time I did, which was out of like location sketching, I didn't have an eraser out. I thought, no, I'm just going to draw with the pencil as if it were a pen in that respect. So even if you love drawing with pencil, you can still do without the eraser. It's just that, if you're weak, you can go and dig it out of the bag if you've got one and you've taken it. Any more questions, anyone? Or will we round this up? So any subjects you don't think I've ever covered that you'd like to have something on? Or I'm still promising to try and learn watercolor so I can have some videos on, trying to learn watercolor, things not to do. I got all the supplies. I just have to clear the headspace to do it. Any other thoughts? I've been jabbering on for an hour and 3 minutes now. So are there any comments or questions? Or if there are, or I'd love you just to tell me where you're listening from. I always find that really interesting and in some way helpful. What part of the world are you in? I can sometimes make a guess. I'm assuming Nishith, you're in probably India somewhere, or Sri Lanka, or maybe Pakistan. But somewhere in that part of the world. Massachusetts in the US. Yep, very good. I think the US is from Australia. It's just impossible to sort of at a given point in time um, know where what time it is from Australia. Nuremberg, wonderful. Was stopped in Nuremberg going to Berlin from Bielefeld once, and I'd have loved to have got out and had a look around there. I mean, I'm a bit of a history person, so so much about it. And we only had like 15 minutes. And so I didn't really want to go far from the station. So I basically just went out of the station and looked, and there was this really big round stone like tower with a cap on top. That obviously, well, I think it was very old. And I thought, wow, I wish I had time to go and explore down in that direction. And by then I thought, better get back on the train or I'll miss the train to Berlin. So yeah, I'm hoping to get to Germany soon to do some more drawing and to visit some friends. Argentina, aha, wonderful. And New Jersey, yep. Oh gosh, you are an early bird. Yes. Well, I won't be an early bird tomorrow. Although it's only it's 9:45. Well, look, thanks everyone. I probably should go to bed. I told my wife I wouldn't be too long. So thanks for joining. Look, if you're on a self-taught journey, there are lots of strengths in that. And yeah, take advantage of them and minimize the weaknesses, and being aware of weaknesses always lets us overcome often more than we would think, and really sets us up for success. Thank you. I very much hope I do get to Fibonacci. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. Good night, good morning, wherever you are. Good afternoon. I'll see you next time. Bye.